Good afternoon. Thank you for joining me for this month's Career Connection. We're just going to wait a few more minutes to let participants join in, and then we'll go ahead and get started. All right, perfect. Let's go ahead and get started. So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining me for our month's Career Connection webinar. My name is Neverly. I'll be your host for today. We're really excited to have Matt and Tina Schubert here today to discuss leveraging staffing agencies. But before we do get started, I do want to go over a few housekeeping items. Today's session is being recorded and will be available on our YouTube channel within 48 hours. We will share the link of the recording as well as any presentations or materials shared in today's presentation. Because this is a webinar, all lines are muted. If you have any questions, you can use the Q&A box located at the bottom of your screen. As we move through the presentation, feel free to type in your question in that Q&A box, and we'll reserve the last 10 minutes to go over any questions that you might have. So our speakers for today are going to be Matt and Tina. Then we'll reserve the last 10 minutes for Q&A, and then we'll wrap up with a survey. At the end, we do ask everyone to remain on the webinar for an additional minute to complete a survey that'll pop up on your screen, and we'd really appreciate it. Your feedback is really important, and it helps us develop our programming as well as webinars. Before I turn it over, I do want to take a few minutes to talk a little bit about the Women's Resource Center. So the Women's Resource Center has been empowering women in Sarasota, Manatee County since 1979. We have 3 centers across both counties, one in Bradenton, one in Sarasota, and one in Venice. We serve over 9,000 clients yearly and deliver about 7,000 hours in programming. Our mission here at the Women's Resource Center is to engage, educate, enrich, and empower women of all generations. We're a place where women can come when they're not really sure where to turn to for help. To do so, we offer our clients resource advising, mental health counseling, group and educational programs, career services, educational workshops, as well as scholarships, in addition to legal and financial consultation and education. All of this is offered at low or little no cost to our clients. Since this is a webinar about careers, I'll talk a little bit more about our career services. Here at the Women's Resource Center, our career coaching program offers individual assistance in prepping for a successful job search. This includes career discovery, resume preparation, interviewing skills, networking techniques, and so much more. It also includes computer tutoring, which is one-on-one help with navigating online job search, uploading resumes, helping with computer basics, as well as Microsoft Office applications. We also have 3 career closets, one at each of our locations, where you can shop for free clothing and accessories for women who are attending job interviews or who have just secured a job and are in need of attire. We also serve clients that are in need for clothing for any reason. We do want to hear from you, so please use that Q&A box located at the bottom of your screen. And as a reminder, our Career Connection is being recorded and will be made available on our YouTube channel and shared within 24 to 48 hours. Any presentation flyers or materials will also be shared. As I mentioned, at the end of the webinar, you will see a brief survey on your screen. We please ask that you remain on your screen for an additional minute, and this will help us improve our webinars and programming. Thank you so much for attending today's Career Connection, and I'm going to turn it over to Matt and Tina.
Thank you, Nirvali.
Thank you.
We're going to go ahead and share our screen here. So let's do that. Get that set up. Share screen. Start broadcast. 2, 1. Great. Yeah. Hi, everybody. It's great to be here this afternoon, and Tina and I are excited to talk with you about the world of staffing, which we are guessing many of you may be familiar with, in working for a staffing or temporary help company. It depends on how people describe their company, but it's one of those 2 ways. Tina and I owned a staffing company in the Chicagoland area for 25 years. So we're very familiar with the ins and outs of the staffing company world and want to help you navigate it the best you can to either restart your career, find a new career, or just help you, if you're currently working in it, how to best leverage it to help yourself grow within the industry and what you're looking to do. So first off, what is a staffing company? A staffing company is a company which provides employees to other companies in the area. Many of those companies that they supply workers to or employees to are looking for help because they cannot find them. And they want to remain flexible and have the ability to hire as many people as they can through as many different resources as they can. So the staffing company helps them do that. And remember, if you were to work for a staffing company, you work directly for the staffing company and not the company that you're currently working at. For example, if you're working for a staffing company at, let's say, Amazon.com, you have to remember that you're working for that staffing company and not Amazon. So this may get tricky and may create some questions, which we encourage you to ask as we go through the webinar. What are the benefits of a staffing company? Some of the benefits are some jobs turn into full-time positions, which is great for people that are looking to go on to full-time jobs. Another advantage is that you get to try companies out to decide if you like them. This is a nice opportunity for you to test the waters at companies and see if they are a good fit or whether or not it may not be, depending on the company and the skill that you're trying to get. You're usually paid weekly as a regular employee. It keeps you from having to fill out applications from hundreds of other companies. If many of you currently are going on job boards and applying to many 50, 60, 100 different jobs at once, when you go to a staffing company, the good news is you just have to fill out that application. And that staffing company is likely working with dozens of different companies in the area. So you just have to get that one application in to help you, basically to help, and you're done. You won't have to fill it out many times. And many of the jobs are local. Of course, in today's world, you might run into jobs that are hybrid or maybe online. But the good news is that many of the companies that you'll work with have local jobs that are close to you. Now, the challenges that come from working for a staffing company, which, again, some of you may be familiar with, and we're going to be happy to talk about that after, is the jobs may be temporary or part-time. So you should know this in advance. This is a question that you could easily ask the recruiter who you're working with, whether or not the job is temporary, part-time, or am I going to have an opportunity to go full-time? Some of the lingo you may hear is something called temp to perm, meaning it starts as a temporary position, but eventually goes to a permanent position. Some people like a temporary position because they need that flexibility. Some people like part-time because they like that flexibility. So sometimes it's a challenge, and it's something that you may want to discuss upfront with your recruiter. The staffing company's client can decide you're not a right fit and may not tell you why. This is also a challenge. So once again, if we use the example of a warehouse that you go to work at, if you're working for a staffing company, the benefit for the warehouse that you're working at is they could call the staffing company and say, please don't send Matt back tomorrow. And they don't have to say why. They should tell the recruiter what the reason is, but sometimes they don't. They just say, we don't need 5 people tomorrow, and here's the 5 people we don't need. So this could create a little bit of uncertainty and a challenge working for the staffing company. But I would encourage you once again to talk to the recruiter and find out if there's anything you could have done differently, anything you could have done better to help you with the job. And some companies do not provide benefits. In the staffing world, because many of the jobs may be temporary or part-time or temporary to permanent, there's many staffing companies that do not provide any type of benefits. You may see companies that offer holiday pay or vacation pay, but benefits that you may want to receive, such as a health insurance or a 401k or a retirement plan, it may be challenging at staffing companies to find that. And if they do offer it, many times the employee must provide all of the contribution. So for health insurance, they might say, we offer health insurance, but you're responsible for paying the premium, the entire amount. Whereas if you're working for a permanent company, this may be a little bit different, where maybe if in a permanent job, the company that you're working for may be willing to help out with some of the premium.
Mm-hmm.
So those are the big challenges that you may see working for a staffing company. There's probably a few others, which once again, we would love to hear from you, in the question and answer page, because we could talk more about that when we finish up. So now we're going to talk a little bit about payroll and paperwork.
Okay, so thank you for joining, guys. Like anything, we call it paperwork, but of course we know in this world there's really not too much paper anymore. So we're talking about when you go to fill out that application for a staffing company or any company, but particularly in staffing, you'll typically be expected to create an account or log into a tool on some platform connected to the staffing company, and you'll get credentials, you'll set up an account, and that's always what you will need to go back and finish all your paperwork. So it's very important that you remember what your credentials are, that you remember, how did I get to this site, so that later on when you go back in and they may ask you a question, you'll be able to go back in and see what you had filled out so far. I think an important thing that comes up is questions about your background and also the requirement to possibly take a drug test. Okay, so we'll touch briefly on the questions about your background. In many states, well, I'll say particularly in Florida, it's not a state that is very friendly for employees. It's more friendly for employers. So that doesn't always work for us as when you're trying to get a job. So there may be questions about your background, and you want to be honest, but you don't need to give all the information if you're not asked. Okay, so what I mean is that if they don't ask you if you have a felony, there's no reason for you to offer that information. For example, if they don't ask you if you have a criminal charge specifically, there's no reason for you to offer it. If they ask you if you have been convicted of any crimes, you have to honestly answer that question if it's a yes or no question. Many customers also care about even simple misdemeanors. Now, we know this is wrong, and there's a lot of gray area in the law around this, but unfortunately, this could be a question that comes up. So you need to be honest, but you don't have to also be a complete open book, if you know what I'm saying.
And there's a difference between a charge and a conviction.
Correct.
Which is important to
remember. So you need to remember those words, and as you read those questions, and if you have anything pending, I'm sure you've already experienced this, but you need to be careful about the words that you read in the question and the words that you use. As I said, you want to be honest, but we don't want to be completely open unless somebody asks us very specific questions, because this could be used against you, and we don't want this. Of course, you may be required to take a drug test, and that is just typically, they'll send you to a lab like Quest. Some companies do a urine test. Some companies will do a mouth swab, hair follicle. There's a variety of things that could be available to be tested. If you take certain prescription drugs, be prepared with a prescription to show that, so that you can show why you may have failed a drug test. And prescription drugs might include Adderall, anything related to amphetamines, which is, things you may take for ADD. Any other psychopharmaceuticals may show up. So you be prepared. If you take those medications as a prescription, just bring the prescription with you, and those failing for those drugs can't really be held against you. So that's important. Again, on the paperwork section, there is a form, and it's called an I-9. What is this form? You'll see it. Every employer in the United States is required to complete this form. So every job you go to, you will need this. So it's good to understand what this is, and I'm sure you've seen it before, but might not remember even doing it. This is a federal form that verifies your identity, that says, I'm me, I'm Tina. And the second part is it verifies that you are authorized legally to work in the United States. Okay, so those are the two questions that this form will satisfy for your employer, and every employer will ask you to fill this out. So the typical ID that is used is either your state ID, your driver's license, and a social security card, meaning that the state ID says you're you, and the social security card says that you are able to work in this country. You could also present a US passport, not expired, or a permanent residence card. And this would also be called, some people say, a green card, and that document contains a number that starts with an A number, and that document alone satisfies that your identity, you're who you are, and that you are authorized to work in the US. There's other kinds of work visas available. If you have questions on that specifically, you can go to the I-9info at .gov page on the internet and find out exactly what kind of documents that you need to present. The best page, or the worst, depending on how it goes, your payday. In the state of Florida, your employer can decide how you will be paid and on what day. Okay, that means if you're the kind of person that says, I want to get a check, in the state of Florida, you can't decide that. Only your employer can. So that's, most people don't, but there are those that might want that. Most staffing companies will pay you via direct deposit. Most employers will pay you this way, of course, to your bank. Or if you don't have a bank account, you can go on a platform like PayPal, and there's a variety of other tools out there, as you probably are well aware of, that you can be paid onto. You will not be offered a physical check necessarily. A lot of staffing companies use pay cards, and a pay card is a great tool that can help you be paid via direct deposit if you don't have a bank. Basically, a pay card is, in essence, a kind of electronic bank, which PayPal is also. So it works in the same way, except there's no physical branch, there's nobody to ask you. They'll just give you a pay card and then put your money on there. Remember, like everything in this world, there are a lot of fees out there. These are for-profit companies, just like a bank, and they have to find a way to make their money so that they can afford to stay in business. One of the ways they do this is by charging fees for the transactions and things that you may ask for on the platform that you use, be it PayPal or Venmo or a pay card or your bank specifically. Many times there's a monthly fee. Sometimes there's transaction fees. So you want to be very aware of these rules and policies that are associated with any way that you may get paid. In our experience, this was an area that lots of folks, when they get hired, you know, you're excited about getting a job and they give you lots of papers and sign here and this, but you miss some stuff. And sometimes you miss, what does it mean to get paid? I have to pay a fee for that? How do I get my money? What if I lose my card? How will I get my pay replaced? So these are very, very simple questions, but it's always a good idea to ask these questions simply when you're in the hiring process. I know that from our point of view, that an employer appreciates you being curious and wanting to own your responsibility of your payroll. So I don't think that any question is out of line. And it's always a good idea to read what is given to you, especially so you're not touched with any surprises. You don't want to get a check for $200 and then all of a sudden have to pay a $30 fee. Nobody wants that. So it's always best to ask the questions ahead of time. Again, that's very important. You want to be your own advocate. And I think particularly when you're working in any job, but especially with a staffing company, because it's a kind of an in-between person, as Matt said. You're not working for the company, but you're there at the company. You always want to have a voice for yourself and be your advocate of anything that could go wrong. Find out when payday is. Find out what is the pay period for your check. Sounds simple. Sometimes you started on a Tuesday and payday's not till the 15th. You were expecting a check on Friday. You're not going to get it for another week and a half. That might not help you pay your electric bill. So you want to know that ahead of time. What is the payday and what is the pay period? Again, understand how you will get paid. Will I get a pay card? What happens if it gets lost? What happens if it gets stolen? You'll verify with the recruiter, what is the policy for calling off sick? What do you do if you'll be late? Remember, it is up to you to know what the rules and policies of any employer are. It is not up to the employer, unfortunately, to take you by the hand and say, listen, you were out sick, but I know you were sick, but you can still come to work tomorrow. That might not be what happens. So we want to be our own voice, and we want to make sure that we're careful in following the rules and policies that are in existence. That's the best way to get hired on a full-time job from a staffing company.
So a few things about staffing companies, again, in general, and especially in Sarasota. So we did a little research, and generally there are certain companies that specialize in different areas of the work world. Some specialize in manufacturing, some specialize in warehousing or office work, some do so in nursing or IT or personal care. The good news is that any area that you want to get into, there's probably a staffing company that does that. So that gives you a number of different opportunities to look at if you want to specialize in a certain area. There's other companies in the area that service all of these different niches and different areas. So what we did is we put a little list together of companies that service both multiple industries. These are the companies that do. Many of these companies are national companies. Some are local, but they all service multiple industries, which means if you're looking to get into manufacturing or office work or even nursing, many of these companies service all of those different areas. Certain companies, as mentioned, specialize. Specifically, these 6. Some of these companies you may be familiar with already. So these are companies that focus in on specifically more industrial work or more healthcare work. And healthcare, as many of you may know already, is a broad range of jobs. It could be helping somebody at home. It could be working in a nursing care facility. It could be working in a hospital. It could be working in a variety of different places. So these 12 or 15 companies that we listed are great places to start if you're looking for a staffing company in the area. Our last slide are really questions, and we haven't seen the Q&A page, but we're hoping maybe to have a little bit of feedback from everybody about your experiences with a staffing company. And along with those experiences, both the good and the bad, and maybe what questions you have about working for a staffing company that maybe we didn't answer today. And the other thing is we listed on here our email address, that if you do have a question and you don't happen to ask it today or you don't want to ask it, feel free to reach out to us at any time, and we'll be very happy to help you. So Navali, that's our, let me go back. Yeah, let's go back to the Q&A. And
Okay,
see, I know
perfect.
we have.
Thank you so much for that presentation. We are opening up the floor to any questions that you might have. Again, using that Q&A box located at the bottom of your screen, you can ask any question that you might have. It does give you the opportunity to ask your question as well anonymously if you're not comfortable, but we will go ahead and open up that floor.
Okay, great. So somebody was wondering about, what happens to get qualified to work as an immigrant, or if you're not sure about what your employment opportunities are. So it definitely, there's unfortunately work experience, and the introduction of AI, I think, has probably not helped that model, because sometimes there's very specific words and language that goes in there, and the AI bot pushes people into a certain bucket and they never get a call again. I think for the most part, it is a numbers game, especially for those of us who are just trying to build our experience. I would say, as far as education and work experience, if available, and I'm sure Women's Resource Center can help with some of this thing. I think there are some opportunities to find different kinds of small certifications and small classes in certain field niches that can help find ways to beef up your resume, so that you may have have an opportunity to take a certification in a class. Let's say you're interested in healthcare, let's say in blood draws, or let's say you're interested in auto mechanic work, let's say, whatever it is, that there are small different kinds of certifications out there, that could help build your resume. And some of those questions will help you get a call back. I think that's a difficulty now with the advent of IA. What we key in there, sometimes we end up, in the spool of the netherworld.
The other question I have for that person is, did they apply to staffing companies or was it companies direct? I don't know if they could answer maybe in the chat box or if they like to answer.
Oh, the slide.
Oh yeah, I'll show that.
Sure.
Okay, let me just, there was a question just regarding sharing the screen again, so let me just do that. If that's okay, Nirvana.
Yeah, it's perfectly fine. And again, we will be sending out the presentation as well in an email within 48 hours. So you will have access to that screen slide as well as the recording, just in case you forgot anything.
Right.
Okay.
But if they want to get started right after this call,
Right.
then they can do it. So let me just share that real quick.
And then
so the person that asked that original question, have they tried staffing companies? That would be a question I would have. So let me just oops. So here are the companies that service one industry. Somebody wants to just take a snapshot of that. I'm sure that's maybe what you want to do. And here are the companies that service many different industries.
Right.
So that's a good 12 or 15 companies there.
Right. There was a question that came up about gaps in employment. Okay. So I think what I would recommend, or what I think that what we have seen is to explain a gap in employment is to, let's say it, I'd say it the same way I talk about backgrounds, is to be honest, but don't give too much information, if I can say that in a way. So I think the best way to explain gaps of employment is to just say, yeah, it was, I was, I had a difficult time that year, or I had just moved and I was trying to get myself settled. They don't need to know that you had to, kick out your man and you had a problem. They don't need to know all that. That's not important. Okay. That maybe you got in trouble with the law. Maybe somebody in your family got in trouble with the law. Maybe you were homeless. That is all part of the reason, maybe, but it's not really important to go into all that. Okay. So I try to be as staying honest, because we don't want to lie, but also to be as, to say, it's kind of a game, if I could say it that way, to be I don't want to say it as vague as possible, but there are pat answers that I would say, and I would say that that's how I would say it. I was in the middle of relocating. So, I took a gap at that time. Or, you want to be mindful of what you say. Yeah, it could be that you didn't have childcare and you had to stop working. It could be that. As an employer, some employers put that in their mind and say, oh, she's always going to have trouble with childcare. Okay. I know that's the wrong thing that a person might come away with, but people may do that. So that's when I say we want to be honest, but also we don't have to give ourselves in these moments, right? Because right now we're just a person applying for a job. We don't have to give our life out there. We don't have to give ourselves. We don't have to say exactly what happened. Okay. I mean, this would be my advice. So we want to be honest, because, you never want to get caught back in a lie at some point, but you don't have to tell everything, if that answers the question.
That's good. That's right. So anybody have any experiences that they want to share in working for a staffing company? Good, bad, or ugly? Because I know there could be a variety.
While we wait and see if anybody does respond, I did have a question. Are you able to be employed with multiple staffing companies at the same time?
Yes, except usually not at the same company, right? So let's use Amazon call center as an example. Okay, so if you could apply to 10 different staffing companies, and you could get an assignment to Amazon call center, but the other staffing company won't send you also to Amazon call center. Okay, because that would create a situation with overtime and pay and a variety of things. But staffing companies, you could apply to as many staffing companies as you want. You could work for many staffing companies at the same time. There's no conflict there.
No, the challenge, I think, is even though you could apply to many, if you're working at one and it's a 2-month assignment, and another company calls you that you applied for,
right,
then you have a decision to make. Let's say you're making $12. Let's say you're making $15 at company A, and it's a 2-month assignment, and you're 3 weeks into the job. And now staffing company B calls you and says, I have a job for you for $18 an hour. It's a big decision.
That's right.
I can't say which one is right. I could say that if you leave company staffing A in the middle of a specific length assignment, it may be challenging to go back to work for them, because they're going to remember that. They're going to have documented that. So yes, apply to as many staffing companies as you want and get as much information as you can.
Exactly.
But, just be careful when you're working for one and then another one calls and then you start to job hop. When you start to job hop, you usually get into trouble because you don't want to get a bad reputation with a lot of different staffing companies, because then you probably have to go work somewhere else.
Right. One experience that a person might have, of course, we're staffing people. So, we see it from one side, which is our employer side. But the reality is that there's a lot of lousy staffing companies out there. And they know that people often that come, especially for, CNA positions or lower rate positions, that people are, looking for something and it's hard to get this job. So I think that a lot of times there is a bad rap there. Staffing companies can be very punitive. Okay, this is a problem that people have. You were 3 minutes late 6 times and then you get fired. So you can see that sometimes in companies, and that gets driven down from the companies, and it's just a numbers game, right? Because they may have 5,000 employees. They don't have a moment in time to deal with this happened, this happened, this happened. So you have to be careful about that. That does happen. So sometimes staffing companies certainly get a bad rap that way. But as Matt said, I think that sometimes you have to be careful. You don't want to say, well, I worked for 2 weeks and now I want to go someplace else, and then I want to come back, and then, and so on. So
there was a question regarding legal. Are there any legal staffing companies in Sarasota? I did not find any. It doesn't mean that there wasn't, but you could easily Google legal staffing company Sarasota and something will come up. Even the good thing about legal is that might be something that you could be remote to do. So it might not be something that you necessarily have to have a local company. If you have legal skills, somebody might be willing to employ you that's in Palm Beach or in Miami or in even Georgia or, South Carolina or somewhere else. So there are national legal staffing companies, and I'll get some of those to Nirvali so she could post those.
Okay, so here we're getting some good questions. Okay, so a person asked a question about that they have a disability and they often need to have medical and have to return to a different state. Tricky. Personally, no, I would not disclose that to the staffing company. What will happen when you have to leave to go get treatment? If you need to leave, then you need to leave. There's really nothing that you can do about that. You give the best notice that you can, and you say, I'm going to work till the end of this week, and then I have to be out of town for 2 weeks. If they say, well, then you can't come back, then you have to say, okay. But personally, you don't have an obligation to tell your employer that you have a disability, and they have no legal authority whatsoever to ask you such a question. And that would go to another question that came up too. You have no legal obligation to tell your employer that you're pregnant, and they have no legal right to ask you such a question. As a matter of fact, it's a violation of federal law for them to ask you such a question. Okay. You may look pregnant. I may look pregnant. I'm 65 years old. They could guess however they want to guess. You have no obligation to say that you are pregnant. Okay. Especially if it's a temporary job. You have no ethical obligation to disclose that. It's not going to impact your work. At the end of the assignment, at the end of 6 months, if you're going to have a baby, then you say, I'm having a baby. They'll know at some point. I've done a good job or I haven't done a good job, but you do not have to tell them that you're pregnant, and they have no legal right to ask you this question. Make sense?
Is day labor and staffing agency the same thing? Day labor, there are,
Well, yes.
in certain areas, day labor staffing companies that are mostly construction companies, because they don't know until the day before, even that day, if they need employers. Sometimes you also hear the term day labor when people hang around Home Depot, or when people are hanging around certain apartment complexes and guys drive by in a truck and they pick them up because they need a day laborer. So those guys are getting paid cash or getting paid under the table. That type of day labor is different than a day labor staffing company. So it could be the same thing, but the key is that in a day labor, the staffing agency has to, don't forget, you're working for the staffing agency and not the guy driving the truck.
Mhm.
You're not getting paid cash. So those are the big determinants,
Right.
when it comes to day labor.
Right. Remember, we said earlier that every employer has to have you fill out that form, that I-9 form. If somebody pulls over and you get, and they says, oh, we got a plumbing job for you and it's going to last for the next 2 days. We're going to give you $17 an hour. Get in. If you don't fill out that form and you're with your social security number, then you're being paid under the table. That's up to you whether to take or not take that job, but that's not working for a staffing company.
How do we determine a better staffing agency, or which is a better staffing agency? Most of the time, similar, like if you were to go into a fast food restaurant, it really has to do with the people working in that office. It really has to do with the workers and the manager in that office. I couldn't tell you which ones in Sarasota are good or bad. Once again, it's really up to who is in that office. They're not selling you a product that you could taste or feel or touch or smell, right? It's not a product, it's a service. And when it's a service, it's really about those people working in that office.
Mm-hmm.
So you'll get a pretty good feel, I would guess, relatively quickly based on their response, the customer service, what they say, how they say it, how they treat you,
Mm-hmm.
as to what is good and what is bad.
That's right.
Right. And it's
I think that's a great question. And I think what we have to do, maybe we're all women on the call because it's Women Resource Center. So I'll say it, and assuming that we're all women, besides Matt. We must learn, develop, and build this idea of listening to our intuition. Okay, this is very important as women. So we know when we walk into a place of business or any place else, we know we have to have a feeling that is a place where we feel welcomed. That is a place where people seem engaged with me. That is a place where people care a little bit about me as a person. That is a place where there's women working, okay? Just to say, that is a place where we feel that somebody is listening to us. And if we ask a question, that they're answering us, okay? So that is very, very important, that when we walk into a place, as Matt said, it's about the people that work in that place. So we want to listen as often as we can, not push that down, that little voice inside of us that says, this place doesn't feel great. Or you walk in there and say, oh, this place feels okay. We want to listen to that voice. We have to listen to our intuition a little bit and know what that is like. And I think that's the best way of saying.
Right. Another good question. Should my resume be created by AI in order to be recognized? I don't think that's a bad idea. Mm-hmm. Clearly, AI is, don't forget, there's a good chance AI is going to read that resume anyways. Unfortunately, that's the way it is today. And there's a good chance that a person is not going to read that. It's going to be some kind of bot or AI.
That's right.
AI, generator that's going to read it. So I think generating a resume created by AI is a good idea.
Yes.
The one thing with AI, as I'm sure you may be familiar with already, is you want to be very specific in what you want AI to do for you. So the more specific you could be, the better it will be for the resume. And there are certain words and certain phrases that they look for in a resume. It depends on the company, unfortunately, so you don't know. But I think using AI is a good idea. Let's see, next one. Complete change in abilities.
This is an interesting question.
Currently working with vocational rehab to train with current abilities. Are agencies obligated to supply proper equipment?
I'm not sure on Florida, but I think it's something that we could probably find out.
That's a
that-
good question that I think we should we could find out.
So, the question there is that a person had a change in their ability, and working now with a vocational rehab to train to whatever your current ability is. This not just be staffing agencies, but I would say is any employer obligated to supply adaptive equipment to satisfy the disability is what I believe the person is asking. So there are laws around this, and there are laws about accommodations for ADA, and a lot of those have to be satisfied by the employer to accommodate you through ADA, people with disabilities, and that's a very, very important issue. Some small companies might not be able to provide an accommodation, so that's another thing that has to be considered. If you're working with a vocational trainer, that they will have that information as far as the companies that may have the adaptive technology you might need. But it is a very important question, and there are federal laws around this today. Whether they'll be in place tomorrow, I'm not sure. You know, in the state of Florida, as I said, is not excessively friendly for DEI or people with disabilities, and you know, a variety of things. So we need to be mindful about where we are and what the disability is. But we do have laws, and that is an accommodation covered under ADA.
Let's see. Do any staffing agencies place for higher level roles? Absolutely. There are definitely staffing agencies that supply mid-level managers, high-level managers. Most of those also place people on more of a permanent basis. So we talked about staffing agencies mostly in the temporary sense, but some of those companies that I supplied that showed the companies that service all those niches, many of those places also supply mid-level or high-level managers or higher-level positions as well. There's another company, and I'll send this over, called Robert Half International, which does a lot of higher-level placing, mostly on the financial side, but they also do it on management side as well. So I'll make sure to send that name over as well.
In this question, it says, where might I find these resources? Is this a question, is this a question about the adaptive resources or about AI? I'm not sure, so maybe we can get a clarification on what that question is. Adaptive. So what I would do there is I would go to the, I think you could probably find it under either ADA accommodations, maybe .gov. I would look up, that's what I would look up in the keyword search. Adaptive tools, ADA adaptive tools, employment rules around ADA adaptive tools. I would look a little bit around that, you know, and see what it is. I think that's where I would look for. And, you know, I could do a little research and then share it. If that person wants to send us an email, we could do a little, there you go. We could do a little research as well.
Good.
Somebody posted jobsaccommodataionnetwork.org as a resource.
That's good.
And Jan could be a person there.
Good.
Jan.
Jan's the abbreviation.
It's a good name.
That's good.
Very good. Thank you.
All right, so perfect. It's definitely been interactive, lots of good questions. We are coming up on time. So as you know, Matt and Tina had mentioned, they will be sharing their email addresses as well. If you had any additional questions, feel free to shoot those questions to that email address. I will be sharing the presentation as well as a recording within 48 hours to everyone who attended, as well as those who couldn't attend the presentation as well. I want to thank everybody for joining us today. Thank you, Matt and Tina, for presenting. It was definitely educational at most. Lots of good questions did come out of this, and I'm so glad that we were able to reach a lot of people. So thank you for joining us today for our monthly career connection. Everyone have a wonderful day. There will be a survey that does pop up on your screen here briefly. Again, we would love to hear from everybody, and the feedback does help us improve our webinars and programming.
Thanks all. Have a great day. Thanks so much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.